Today we're talking to Dr. Theresa DeLorenzo, who works with athletes to help them make sure they're eating the correct proportion of macro and micronutrients. This will help them to perform at their best, come up with a race day nutrition plan and hydration plan, feel and race as good as possible, improve their gastrointestinal health, and also improve their body image. She uses yoga therapy as adjunctive therapy for clients with anxiety, body dysmorphia, and pain, and teaches aerial yoga classes in her home yoga studio. So welcome, Dr. Theresa. We're so happy to have you on the Sensitivity Doctors podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
To talk about such a really important issue, which is a question I think all of us have. It's
Yes.
Menopause. What is menopause? How does diet affect menopause? We had a previous episode where we discussed the fact that the gut is being seen as kind of the second brain, and there's so much research coming out about this. So we'd love to know from you, just to kind of set our foundations for this episode, what is menopause and why does it affect the gut?
In a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah. So what is menopause? That is a loaded question. So basically what's happening is, women are so used to the secretion of estradiol, which is a form of estrogen that we have been getting mad at our whole lives since puberty. But, the grass isn't greener on the other side. So that estradiol is super helpful in a lot of things that are going on in our body, such as keeping inflammation down. So I'll go back to that because that's what connects us to our gut. But it preserves our bone mass. It preserves our muscle mass. It keeps our body temperature regulated. It does so many things in our body. And that starts to decline. The production of that declines. And so when I said it helps with our body's inflammation, that's where the gut plays a role. So in our gut, think of your gut as like a straw, right? So when the gut is intact and there's not inflammation going on in our body, the straw is nice and intact and there's no porous, there's no holes, there's no leaking. When inflammation happens, the gut kind of gets porous and it gets inflamed and the villi flatten. So we decrease our absorption, we feel bloated, and we start reacting to nutrients that we hadn't been reacting to before. So it's this whole cascade of events and then that worsens the inflammation. The other thing that happens is our mood is impacted. So serotonin is produced in our gut. 90% of it is produced in our gut. People think it's produced in our brain. We utilize it in our brain, but it's produced in our gut. And in order to get from our gut to our brain, it has to travel via the vagus nerve. And when we're inflamed from the decrease in estradiol, it's harder for that serotonin to get from our gut to our brain because the nerves endings are inflamed and they're not traveling as readily. While the estradiol is decreasing, estrone is another form of estrogen that's increasing. And that does the opposite of the estradiol. It increases our inflammation. It breaks down our bones. It breaks down our muscle. It increases fat accumulation. So all of these things are happening. Isn't it lovely? It's wonderful. But it's not a death sentence. There are things we can do with food, nutrition, and exercise to help mitigate all this. But that's sort of what's happening. And that's why the gut is so impacted, because the inflammation just impacts the ability for that serotonin to get up there. It impacts our ability to absorb nutrients. All of that stuff is happening.
Can I ask a quick question about the vagus nerve? Because I've never, ever heard that the vagus nerve had anything to do with this.
The vagus nerve is the connector, the communication between the gut and the brain. So people think of our gut as our second brain, right? That's a lot of things happen there. So, when our gut is inflamed, it allows the negative bacteria to flourish. It doesn't allow the good bacteria to flourish, so that connection is going to be impacted between the gut and the brain. So it's going to be harder for that serotonin to communicate and get to the brain, where that's another reason. So our mood is impacted. People who go through perimenopause think, they feel like they're in PMS all the time. They feel irritable all the time. So those things are because of the serotonin not being able to get to where it needs to be.
Wow. Okay, so inflammation is bad.
Inflammation is bad. We need it when we get injured to help us heal, but yeah, overall inflammation all the time is definitely not a good thing for sure. Okay.
So you had mentioned perimenopause. Do you mind
Mhm.
really briefly explaining the difference and what the earliest
Hmm.
signs of that are? I actually read an interesting statistic about how millennials are the largest generation, at least in the US, and millennials are also reaching
Mm,
perimenopause. And so it's a
Hmm.
big push for understanding about what this is.
absolutely.
So, as someone who is nearing it or doesn't know what it is, how do you know you're entering it?
So, perimenopause, believe it or not, people don't want to hear this, but can begin between the ages of 35 and 45. That's the average of when people
Hmm.
enter perimenopause. So, you might know you're entering it when you sort of notice an increase in your PMS symptoms.
Hmm.
Things like breast tenderness, more irritability when you're about to menstruate. Yeah, like when I go on a run, I'm like, oh gosh, before I did my menopause program, now I'm like, okay, I'm good. But so it starts a lot earlier than people, I guess, want it to, or
Mhm.
you might notice irregularity with when you menstruate, when you get your period, when PMS starts, how long it lasts. I know for some friends who, you know, friends and clients who will go months at a time without getting, or they'll get it every 2 weeks.
Mm.
Of course, if you're on, birth control, that's going to impact things a lot.
Hmm.
But if you're not, those are ways to notice. Even if you are on birth control, you still will notice those irritability symptoms, the cramping, more joint pain you might notice. If you're a
Mm.
runner, a lot of my running friends will notice it's harder to recover after long runs and workouts, things like that. So just kind of like people think, "Oh, I'm getting old." No, this is part of, perimenopause. And that
Mm.
period of time, no pun intended, starts between 35
Oh
and 45 and can last 5 to 10 years to complete and put you
my
into full
goodness.
menopause. I know your eyes are like, "Whoa." Yeah, it's a long time, but there's things we can do, so that's the good news.
Mhm.
But just also for interest sake, I read somewhere that it is a genetic kind of thing. If your
Mhm.
mom and your grandma and so on were kind of prone to entering menopause earlier or having early perimenopause,
Yeah,
that may also be
that's
true
an
for you,
indication of
right?
when you
And
will go through.
that that's a long family history for me.
Yes.
Um,
Oh my gosh, Dr. Jean, you and I are like in all the ways we're so yin and yang because in my family it's very late. We
oh,
s-
Oh,
we
really?
start we
okay.
start our cycles very late. I was very late into my teens until I started it.
Me
And
too,
I
because
rec-
of gymnastics, yeah.
because of what?
Gymnastics, I was a gymnast, so it
Oh,
was
okay.
totally
Okay.
not for good reasons, but
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, maybe we'll unpack that a little, but yeah, so I'm curious about that because again, this is like I'm standing on the edge of the valley listening and learning all the stuff in anticipation of when it comes. And
Oh.
it almost I'm almost like, "Oh gosh, because it's going to be later, is it going to be worse?" So
Well, I don't know, I've never seen that correlation.
but
So,
yeah, you had a great question, Dr. Jean.
yeah, no, I just wanted to confirm it is bound to genetics in some way, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you're more, it's not necessarily going to be that way, but you're more
More
likely to
likely.
also then enter it earlier
Absolutely.
um, than maybe somebody that doesn't have this kind of family history.
Exactly. Yeah, my mom was about 40. I remember sitting at the dinner table and she would just all of a sudden get red and sweaty. It was like,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
hot flashes are happening. Yeah. So she started pretty early and I'm 46 and have definitely been in it for some time now. So
Mm.
yeah.
So, taking into account now what menopause is, what perimenopause is, what happens in the gut, and what gets produced there and sent to our brain, why is it so important to adjust your diet in this phase and when you're going through this?
Yeah, so the diet, many reasons. So the diet can, first of all, help to break down the byproducts of that estrone, which is one that increases inflammation and causes all the things that we want to mitigate. It can upregulate. There's things we can eat that can upregulate the estradiol. And there's also things that we can eat that help to preserve our bone density, preserve our muscle mass, and decrease the fat accumulation.
Mm-hmm.
So, things that we want to do are, and I'm not saying eliminate carbs in any way, but slightly decrease our carbohydrate consumption and focus on more whole grains, high fiber carbohydrates. Um, Simple carbs like sugar do feed the negative bacteria in our gut. They allow them to flourish. They don't, and then when those are flourishing, the positive bacteria are not,
Mm.
and that increases the inflammation and breaks down that vagus nerve communication. Protein can help to preserve the muscle mass a little bit and mitigate some of the fat accumulation. And I want to just expand on this a little bit because there is such a push in the media for protein, protein, protein.
Mm-hmm.
More of a good thing isn't better. We still don't want to go crazy with protein. You know, some people are saying eat a pound or eat a gram of protein per pound. No,
Yeah.
that's way, way, way too much. Too much protein is only going to dehydrate you.
Hmm.
It's going to cause you to decrease or increase your urination of calcium. So that's not going to help your bones at all. So there's a lot of things that can be, aftermaths of too much protein. So too much isn't better. So about 20% of our diet are 1 gram per kilogram, which is, our weight divided by 2.2. So that's not going crazy, and then focusing on lean proteins like chicken, salmon is great, fish is great, all seafood, because that has
Mm-hmm.
omega-3 fats that help to decrease the inflammation further. I'm going to say that word a lot of times in this episode
Yeah.
because inflammation is just the crux of a lot of things with our health, but especially during this phase of life. So so decreasing the protein or increasing the protein a little bit, decreasing the carbohydrates just a little bit, and focusing on whole grains, and also focusing on anti-inflammatory fats versus pro-inflammatory fats. So you mentioned this a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-inflammatory fat foods are things like avocados, seeds like chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds. We'll talk about those a little bit more because those are one of the foods that really help the estrogen shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Things like fish, like I said. So those are some of the things that can help. And I like to tell people to focus on what to add to their diet versus focusing on what to remove, because that can be really, it's tough, right? When you say, okay, I
Yeah.
can't have this, I can't have that, then that's what you want. So I try to have, focus on let's increase these things, and inherently you will push out some of those things that you don't want as much of.
On the seeds, I wanted to ask you a question about that because you're saying that that's very good for inflammation. What if you're perhaps like me and your gut really does not agree with seeds? What can you replace that with, or what
Mhm.
can be your
Such a
alternative?
Yeah,
good
so the
question.
reason the reason seeds are so good, like flax seeds, well, flax seeds are separate sort of conversation, but the chia seeds and the hemp seeds, they have calcium, so they help your bone health. They have iron, which during perimenopause we have trouble metabolizing. We need more. They also have omega-3 fat. There's plenty of other source, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention magnesium. So magnesium
Mm.
is huge with our gut.
Mm-hmm.
Magnesium is used in over 300 processes in our body, but it really helps our gut health and helps to keep the inflammation down in our gut, helps that communication between the gut and the brain, the vagus nerve. So those seeds are sources of all of those things. Other sources are avocados. They don't have the calcium and the iron, but you can get them other places like cooked spinach, cooked broccoli. You can get calcium and iron from. They have to be cooked, otherwise the calcium and the iron are bound to phytates, making them unabsorbable.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh,
but the
Interesting.
avocados do have the omega-3 fat and the magnesium. Chocolate has magnesium. That's cool.
oh yeah.
Chocolate's good.
So we're recommending everyone
Wait,
run
wait,
out
wait.
and get their menopausal chocolate.
Yes, that's right.
Any
Digestive
any type
fruit.
of chocolate or just like
Good
I
dark
mean, dark
chocolate and the
chocolate has
boring chocolates?
more. Dark chocolate has more. Peanut butter has some magnesium as well. So flax seeds. and this sort of dives us into another conversation, but flax seeds do help to shift that estradiol estrogen metabolism in our body. So they do help with the menopausal symptoms. So flax
Yeah.
seeds are a really good one.
I
Sesame
love
seeds
flaxseed.
too, I don't typically recommend because the S oils are inflammatory. Sesame, safflower, sunflower, and peanut, those are all inflammatory oils,
Oh.
but sesame seeds do not as much as flax seeds, but they do help to mitigate some of the menopause symptoms. Flax seeds
So,
do have to be ground, though, in order to get the benefits from them.
okay. And so a little bit about protein then. You were saying that protein dehydrates
Too much.
or can
Too
if
much.
you
Yes.
have too much, right?
Yeah.
So when I was going through, I recently went through the low FODMAP diet, and one of the things that my nutritionist told me is that I'm taking in far too little protein because I'm
Mm.
just not a meat lover. I'm
Okay.
just not, it's never been a thing for me. I needed to up my protein intake, and I was put on like a vegan protein powder, and I struggled
Oh.
because it made me so constipated and it caused so much pain in my gut. So that's why I was resonating when you were saying too much is also not a good thing.
Right.
So, can you just explain, does that have anything to do with the dehydration then? Is it because it dehydrates you,
Potentially.
therefore you get
Potentially.
constipated and everything
Yes.
goes wrong?
So what happens in our body? So we can metabolize about 30 grams of protein at a time. After that, we have to convert it to fat, but we can't use all of it. The nitrogen can't be stored. Like we can store fat, we can store carbs, they all get converted to fat and stored as fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
The nitrogen from protein that we can't utilize once we've used what we've needed, the nitrogen has to get excreted. So we have to excrete that by urinating it out. And with it goes sodium, fluid, and calcium.
Oh.
Calcium we want because that's good for our bones. It also helps with fat metabolism. And fluid, obviously, if we're getting rid of tons of fluid, then that's going to cause us to get dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason these high protein diets are touted is because people are losing weight. Yeah, they're dehydrated. It's a lot of water weight.
Oh, okay.
So it's a false assumption. A lot of people come to me or will lament that, oh my gosh, I just can't get this amount of protein in that a trainer or whoever is trying to tell me to get. Yeah, because your body's telling you enough. Like this is too much. It's hard to do because it's not beneficial. I'm such an advocate for eat what your body's craving and eat what you are desiring. And if it's too much, it's telling you something,
So can I ask you a clarifying question then? Let's say you are a 150-pound woman. I'm just kind of getting a general. And
Yeah.
I know you probably do kilograms, Dr. Jeanne.
Yeah, so you divide that by
Yeah.
2.2.
I'm kilograms.
So let's say you're a 150-pound woman and you are not perimenopausal. How much protein should you have per day? And if you are perimenopausal or menopausal, how much protein should you have each day?
Well, also exercise would impact that too. But let's say that okay, so let me do the math. Let me be let's see. So 150 divided by 2.2 is 68 kilograms. So let's say you're a non-perimenopausal, like just normal, you're not like a crazy runner like myself, and you're not like lifting weights every day. So you'd need about 70 grams of protein a day.
Okay.
Whoa.
I know, not the 200 grams of people.
Well, and I love that Dr. Jeanne had
No,
mentioned.
no. 70 is already for me. It's like, what?
Oh, that's
70?
a lot. Okay.
That's a lot.
And Dr. Jeanne, you were saying about the meat. I'm a pescatarian, and I
Yeah.
feel like all I gravitate towards is protein. I love protein, although obviously with a balance of fiber. It's like my favorite stuff to eat, because if I don't, I feel cloudy. I don't feel present.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe your body's telling you maybe you're not
I
getting
exercise a lot though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
so maybe your body's like, hello, I need a little more,
Right.
Yeah.
It will caution you as a pescatarian. This might be off topic, but again, just with too much of a good thing isn't better. Fish, we have to be careful of because then we can get too much mercury.
I probably eat fish maybe 2 or 3 times a month.
I'm
more so a vegetarian who does a lot of beans and nuts and
Awesome.
Fermented soy and
Excellent.
avocado. Eggs are my favorite, things like that.
So maybe that's why you don't feel the menopausal symptoms.
Maybe. I don't
A
know.
lot of the things that I'm about to talk about. Yeah. So you
That's
mentioned
amazing.
fermented. So fermented foods, probiotic rich foods do help with the gut health and to keep that
Mm.
inflammation down, keep the villi, intact, absorbing. So all that's really good for that. And I say fermented foods, not probiotic supplements. And the reason I don't say supplements is because we all have a genetic makeup of what probiotic, what live bacteria are inherent to our body.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you take a probiotic that has X, Y, or Z, and those aren't bacteria that are inherent to you, you could throw off that balance and cause more harm than good.
Interesting.
So it's better. I'm always, as a dietitian, I'm always food first. We can cause more harm than good with supplements. They're not regulated. We don't know what we're getting. And, it can be tricky. We can get, again, too much of a good thing.
So I think this also kind of leads us into the next thing, which I want to ask, and that is micro and macronutrients.
Okay.
Why is it so important? And what is it? Can you give us
I
examples
barely
of micros
understand
and
this.
macros?
Oh, okay. So macronutrients are what we just talked about: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. They're the ones that we need in the largest volume. Micronutrients, I kind of love micronutrients. They're the vitamins and minerals, basically. So zinc, calcium, iron, all those things that we need. Super important. Without enough of all of them, we get, deficiency symptoms. With too much of any of them, which is why I kind of steer people away from vitamin and mineral supplements, can cause a lot of toxicity, and a lot of symptoms that way as well. So macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals like zinc, calcium, magnesium, all those things.
Based on what you're saying, though, about leaning away from supplements, I've seen a lot of encouragement around certain supplements when it comes to menopause.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Because I do see that it does really help some people too.
Yeah.
Especially calcium. I feel like that's like really
Yeah.
intense.
So when we take calcium in from a supplement, we can absorb about 600 milligrams at a time. We absorb it more optimally if we take even less of that at a time, aka food, right? A little bit here, a little bit there. And I'm a proponent of small meals and snacks throughout the day, not intermittent fasting, shoving it all together, but breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, maybe another snack. So when you take in calcium a little bit at each of those meals, you're going to absorb a lot more of it than you would if you just take a supplement. So if you can get it from food first, that's better. If you, like you said, you have lactose issues, you might not be able to get all the calcium that you need from food. So then that's when you fill in the gaps with supplements. But if you can get things from food first, so cheese, yogurt, those are both probiotic containing. Tofu, we're going to talk about that a lot because that is like, soy is one of the biggest mitigators of menopause symptoms, but those are calcium containing foods, right? That's why I'm saying you're not feeling them,
I
Dr.
eat so
Kelley.
much.
You are just
I
helping
eat a lot
yourself
of.
more than you even know.
And I
Like
eat
I
none of that
mentioned.
again because that was lactose and soy were my two things.
Oh my
that I
goodness,
couldn't
we're a
do.
case study right here.
You are. So other sources of calcium: cooked spinach, cooked broccoli,
Yeah.
beans, nuts, seeds. Yeah, and you
You are
can't even eat
mentioning everything I love to eat. Everything.
Yes, that's why you're having such a good time. Now,
It's
I
such
will
a good
say that
time.
the plant sources of calcium, like the spinach, the broccoli, the beans, the nuts, the seeds, it helps the absorption of the calcium if you consume a source of vitamin C with it, like tomatoes, peppers, strawberries,
More of my
blueberries.
favorites. Yes.
Okay, you
Yeah,
are
I
just
also love all
good
of
to
those.
go. You're the perfect picture of menopause health.
Now I'm like having to live up to that.
Yeah, yeah. No pressure.
I mean, I have a piece of cake every once in a while.
As you should, as you should. So do I. Yeah. So does that sort of answer the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So if I were just to kind of like put it out there for our audience, what you're saying is the macronutrients are the things that we need the most of. And this would be sources of protein like meat, eggs, things like that.
yeah,
Carbohydrates, which would be like whole grain breads.
yes.
And what was the
Potatoes,
other macro?
corns, fat.
The fats, but healthy fats, right?
Right.
Like omega
Yeah.
3s,
Hmm.
6s, and so on. The micronutrients is what you would get in like spinach, where you can get some of your iron,
Hmm.
maybe even, I don't
Calcium,
know. I think there's zinc
magnesium.
in spinach, but
A
I'm not
tiny bit.
sure.
Yeah, there's a little bit.
I
Yeah.
so that's kind of how you then put it out for yourself, the macros and the micros,
Mhm.
and how they contribute kind of to a balanced diet, giving you
Correct.
everything that you need, right?
Yes.
So when we're looking at perimenopause, even both menopause and perimenopause, I think some things become kind of more of an issue to you as you age, right? One of these is bone density and
Yeah.
bone health.
Hmm.
um, what can we do, except we've spoken about the calcium supplements now, in addition to that, or eat calcium rich foods to increase our bone density or to keep our bone density and bones healthy?
Yeah. So those calcium rich foods that we talked about, I'll repeat just once more, not too much protein, but enough.
Mm-hmm.
And exercise. So
Mm-hmm.
exercise is a huge way to preserve our muscle mass,
Mm-hmm.
decrease that fat accumulation, and to help our bone density. So when I say exercise, bone building exercise, so
Mm-hmm.
lifting weights, strength training,
Mm-hmm.
um, things that you put pressure, on your joints.
Yeah.
Not to say you shouldn't swim or run, but those don't do it as much.
Running, even though you
Yeah,
have the
because
impact.
like the first few minutes, but then it becomes so repetitive. You have to change it up. I'm a marathon runner, so this is like horrible news
Oh,
to me, but
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
and I hate strength training. I'm a yogi and a runner, so I have to try
Yeah.
extra hard, and I hate milk. So my bones are unfortunately my
I I don't love it, but I do strength training 3 times a week, and then I ride bicycle twice a week, and the rest of the time I do
okay.
yoga. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a
Well,
good
yeah, I like to say my
mix.
yoga is, yeah, that's a great mix. Yeah, so mixing it up, so changing direction. So I have a very good friend who's a runner also. That's how I know her, but she's a physical therapist and she does a lot with bone health. And so she gives us plyometric exercises where you're changing direction and jumping from the top to the bottom, up, down, sideways, things like that, where you're changing it up for your bones to stimulate that bone growth
Mhm.
and bone
Kind of
preservation.
emulating like the
So,
playful way that children would move.
Yes, I know. We
mm,
forget how to be
Yeah.
kids. We
Hmm.
forget to eat mindfully. They just eat when they want. And we just get so regimented and we just get so far from what our bodies are asking us for that it's, yes, eat and move like a kid. Bottom line.
Maybe not the candy quite as much, but
No,
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 no, no,
no,
no, no.
no. Yeah.
So another thing that we tend to pay more attention to is, and this actually just happens with age naturally, but I'm sure perimenopause and menopause makes it a little worse, and that's collagen. Because when we start losing collagen, collagen does many things in the body, but one of the things that I think we see the most is when your fine lines and wrinkles tend to be
Mhm.
staying a little longer,
Mhm.
becoming more permanent friends.
Yeah, my take on that is, eating a varied diet and not just taking collagen. I know some people like to do that.
Mm.
I again just think if you're eating protein containing foods, you're gonna get that. You're gonna
And
get
that's what a lot of people don't understand, right? You need protein in order to build collagen. You
yeah,
can't actually make that collagen
Mm.
without the protein.
right.
Hmm.
Right.
Okay.
And another way to keep the wrinkles away, I do aerial yoga, your hang upside down, the blood flow. It's just
Mm.
such a great way to preserve that. So yeah. My clients make fun of me because I always come back to yoga and they're like, "You think yoga is the answer for everything?" I'm like, it kind of is. Beans, nuts, seeds, and yoga is pretty much the answer. Yeah.
So, I know this is a very confusing topic for many people. And I think many of us are kind of in the space where we feel so demotivated when we hear about dietary changes, lifestyle changes,
Mhm.
because there seems to be so many opinions about it, and
Yeah.
everything
Oh
is
my
such a
gosh.
long and complicated change. If you could give one practical tip to our audience members that they can implement today, an easy tip for really helping themselves through changing their diet during this phase of perimenopause and menopause, what would that be?
Well, I would say eating more soy if you can tolerate it. Sorry to Jean, because that does help to upregulate the estradiol. So soy milk, that milk that you like to have before bed, if you have a glass of soy milk, that does help to mitigate the symptoms. and increasing fruits and vegetables. So cruciferous vegetables help to break down the estrone, resveratrol, things, fruits and vegetables, basically berries, all those things are
Resveratrol
going to help
wine.
to
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Can I ask you two
um,
questions about your advice, though? Because although I'm a picture of menopausal dietary health, I guess, I also have thyroid disease.
mm,
And I've known that nightshades and soy sometimes
Yeah.
are pointed at as being adverse to that. So I get very confused sometimes, like how
with
to take all
with
the
the
different
thyroid, the
considerations.
soy just decreases the absorption of the medication. So you just can't take it within the same hour. But
Oh,
having
okay.
soy in your diet is fine as long as, like, say you take your Synthroid or whatever medication you're taking in the
Mm-hmm.
morning and then you're having soy milk at night, totally fine. Or you're having
Oh.
tofu with dinner or lunch, that's fine.
Oh, great.
Um,
Yeah, because
and
you're not
then
supposed to take the medication within an hour of eating really anyway.
so you're good.
Right.
Yeah. So that's good. So just have it later in the day. And I think for people who don't like, tofu is like this taboo. People don't like it. If you blend it into
I
things,
love
people don't even
tofu.
know it's there. I do too. I love it. I make this buffalo tofu dip, and people are like, "Oh, this chicken dip is great." I'm like, not chicken, but okay.
Mhm.
Soy milk, if you don't like to drink it, you can use it in things. Use it in cream soups. Use it to cook with, and then you don't, and the flax seeds too. Those are another thing that help mitigate the symptoms. So those are three big ones. And cruciferous vegetables. So things like Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, radishes, rutabaga, all of those, spinach. We mentioned spinach again. Spinach is definitely a superfood. So those help to break down the estrone, upregulate some estradiol, and decrease the inflammation associated with all of that.
So what happens then if you are in my position where um, you can't stomach soy and like from we spoke about the low FODMAP diet in
Yeah.
another episode, but when I'm saying that I did badly on the soy, I mean I couldn't even tolerate the first day's dose, and
Mm, okay.
doesn't just
So
relate
that's
to
going to do
soy
more
then,
harm than
right?
good
It
for you.
relates to
Yeah.
all kinds of beans, everything kind of that grows in a pod. So what do I do then? Because
Can you tolerate those cruciferous vegetables that I mentioned?
which is the spinach,
Like
the
spinach,
broccoli,
broccoli,
that I
cabbage,
have
Brussels
almost on a
sprouts?
daily
Okay.
basis. Yeah.
So then I would
Yeah.
focus on the things that you can do and do more of them.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and for explaining everything that we did not know about this stage in our
I know there
lives.
were certain things that I had not heard, so that's always
Yeah.
And
exciting.
I just want to mention, I do a program where we kind of introduce one of these components each week.
Mm.
Oh,
And people
cool.
find that super helpful. They get like a workbook that kind of tells them why, gives them some recipes. Okay, let's just focus on one thing this week. So it's 8 weeks long. I'm starting a second cohort in June because everyone was kind of blown away with how, effective just changing their diet was, not
Mm-hmm.
focusing on let's remove 8 to, a million things, but focusing on things that we're adding to our diet. And they were like, whoa, this stuff really helps. So, yeah,
Cool.
menopause mayhem, because that's what it feels like.
I love the name.
Yeah.
So, but leading from that, where can our audience find you? Where can they find this program? Where can they go
Yeah.
to? And what would you like them to know?
So my website is nutrition 4 op for optimalperformance.com. And you can find the Menopause Mayhem program under the nutrition tab on the website. There's tons of recipes, there's yoga classes, all kinds of things, yoga recordings. And, I work with people one-on-one. I work with people in group settings, kind of variety of different approaches. So that is where I'm located. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Theresa DeLorenzo. Or no, it's Theresa DeLorenzo Nutrition, sorry. And yeah, so I post lots of stuff there as well.
And we'll put all of those links in the episode description for you
Awesome.
below.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us
you.
today. And we'll all be on a healthier perimenopausal menopause
Perfect.
journey.
Okay.